So welcome everyone. Just a couple of gentle reminders before we get going here. Please feel free to ask any questions at any time. No need to wait until the end. My only caveat to that is potentially I might not see them in the chat box, but feel free to kind of make a noise, raise your hand if you're comfortable to do that, or drop them in the chat and I'll try and get to them. If not, we will have time for a Q&A at the end. If you can, try and be in a quiet space without distractions. I know that's super difficult with kids. This is a time to focus on you as much as possible. So as much as possible, let's try and do that, but also understand that is not always possible. And if you do need to hop away for any amount of time to deal with anything, please do so. If you have any questions or further discussion points that you don't want to raise during the session here, that you don't feel comfortable doing so, feel free to reach out to me separately afterwards. I'm going to put all of my contact information in a slide at the end. And then lastly, please have a pen and a notepad to hand if you can, because we will be making some notes and hopefully that will be helpful. So on our lineup this evening, we're going to talk about discovering the new you, and we're going to talk about the importance of getting to know ourselves again and why that's important. We're going to talk about grief. We're going to do some journal prompts together, which is why it's super important to have a notepad and pen. And then we're going to talk about how to continue to discover the new you after this workshop has ended, and how you can kind of continue to do some of that great stuff after the workshop has ended. And then, like I said, we'll end with a Q&A. So first of all, this is me. I'm Amy. I am a life and success coach specializing in divorce and separation. I'm also a clinical hypnotherapist, EFT tapping practitioner, a neuro-linguistic programming practitioner, and I'm an MBA. And I use all of those things in combination to help support my clients. But most importantly than all of that stuff is I've been there. I am divorced myself, and I absolutely know what it is like and how to go through it. And the reason that I love to do things like this is that I wish that I had known some of the things that I know now when I was going through my divorce, and hopefully I can share some of that with you and it can help support. I also do have a very adorable dog who is currently sleeping, but may at some point make himself known. So he may join us at some point this evening. So let's kick off with, why do you need to get to know yourself again? If we were with a partner for a long period of time, we obviously compromise. That's normal when you're in a relationship, right? And then maybe you have kids and their needs come first. And before you know it, you don't remember the things that you used to enjoy doing. And now, as we're getting divorced or separated, and maybe you co-parent your kids, you might find yourself with either more free time for yourself, or even if you don't co-parent your children and you have them all of the time, you're still in a position where you no longer have that partner that's always there, that you're doing things together. And so it's super important for us to realize what our individual hobbies, interests, and desires from life are. And that's what we're going to talk about today. I speak a lot about this, and I wanted to touch on it this evening. So divorce is a grief, like a death. And I believe as a society that we don't treat it as such, and we don't treat it with the importance that it deserves. The important thing about grief is that we really have to feel the feeling.
Whoa.
We have to.
What are you doing here?
Feel the pain. If you wouldn't mind putting yourself on mute, that would be amazing. I think someone had a kid situation. So the important thing about grief is that we really have to feel those feelings. We really have to feel the pain and the hurt and the anger and the disappointment, which is horrible and painful. But we have to do that so that we can build our new life. And without going through that grieving process, it makes it so much harder for us to recover. And when I say kind of feel the feelings, I am absolutely not suggesting that it's not important to have a night out with your friends where you might have some drinks and forget about what is happening for a night. But I think overall, we can't hide or run away or dull those emotions. It's really important for us to feel them, even though they can be extremely painful to feel. And how I like to talk about this grief is using the grief cycle, which was originally created to talk about death, but I think it is absolutely applicable to divorce and separation as well. So divorce is like someone died. To all intents and purposes, our ex-partners have died in the way that we used to engage and we used to interact with them. And wherever we are in the grief cycle, wherever you are in your current situation, knowing this cycle can really help. So the first thing to note is that it is a cycle, so it is not a linear line, which means that we jump back and forth on it, which is why sometimes, we can have a great day and feel amazing. And then the next day we're lying on the bathroom floor crying in a heap, right? It's because it's a cycle. So we might feel great one day and feel like we're moving towards acceptance. And then the next day we're really struggling and we move back to the depression phase. So if I just run through this cycle quickly to explain it. So it starts with denial. And that's really when you either decide to end your relationship or your partner has, or perhaps you find out something that ends the relationship, like there's been cheating, for example. And in that denial phase, it's the shock. Your body is protecting you from something that is extremely traumatic and hurtful. And that's a time when we can feel like this isn't happening. This can't be happening. This isn't the bottom has not just fallen out of my world. This is not happening. And then we move to anger. And that can present itself in a traditional anger sense, that we're angry with the world, ourselves, our ex-partner. But it can also present as frustration, irritation, and anxiety. And then we move to the bargaining stage. And the bargaining stage is typically when we really feel very lost and almost frozen. Like we don't know where we're going, we don't know what to do next, and we don't know anything about what our life will look like. It's the time when we can feel super overwhelmed and just feel like stuck in the situation that we're in. Then it can be depression. And when I say depression, I don't necessarily mean that in the medical sense, although it can be, but really just a sense of absolute sadness. And that's the time when it's really important to feel those feelings and allow ourselves to cry and feel the pain and all of those feelings. And then is a time, once we felt all of those things and we might feel them and then go back and then go forwards, is the time that we can get to acceptance. And that's the time that we can explore our options, put a new plan in place and begin to move on. And that's really what we're obviously going to do some of tonight in our workshop here. And being on this workshop and things like coaching, therapy, whatever works for you, really helps us move through this grief cycle quicker and get to a stage where we feel like we can start to build that incredible new life, which we absolutely can. One thing I wanted to touch on before we move on to some of the journaling things is there's a really strong principle in NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, which I absolutely subscribe to, and it is us being a cause for the things that happen in our life. What do I mean by that? Well, first of all, to caveat it, I absolutely don't mean that getting divorced is our fault or that we should blame ourselves or anything of that nature. But what I do work with my clients on is that acceptance that this is where we find ourselves now for whatever reason. And once we start to come through those initial stages of the grief cycle that we've just spoken about, and we can really own our new reality and start discovering ourselves again and actioning on creating whatever new life it is that we want for ourselves, that's the effect. We're going to be so much more positive than if we passively allow life to happen to us. And let me give an example of that. If we allow ourselves to get into the victim mindset, then unfortunately it can kind of be a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy. So feeling as though everything bad always happens to me, or there's no point in applying for that new job because I won't get it anyway, or I can't start dating again because I might never find someone, or I might get rejected, or I'm too old to start again. If we allow those thoughts to own how we act, then of course it will become a self-fulfilling prophecy, because you won't meet someone else because you won't be dating, and you won't get the job because you never applied for it in the first place. So the alternative to that is that we figure out what we want from this amazing new life that we can create, and we go after it. And yes, there absolutely probably will be rejection along the way. You may not get that first job that we apply for, but if we continue to take steps forward, eventually we will get that job and we will create the life that we're looking to create. And that is what I mean by being a cause for the things that happen in our life, rather than just allowing life to passively happen to us. So to create that new reality, though, we need to know who we are, and we need to know what we want. And fundamentally, we also have to have the confidence to go after it. And that's why it's so important to spend time discovering the new you. Because how can you go after a new life if you don't know what it is that you actually want? And how can you go after what you want if you don't feel confident enough to believe that you deserve whatever it is that you want to go after? So spending time now working on ourselves will pay dividends in the coming months and years as we progress. And what I also find is that when clients have done this work, the grief of divorce dissipates quicker, and they start to feel excited about the possibilities that are now in front of them in terms of the new life. It's important to mention that in discovering the new us, you may need to put boundaries in place so that you find the time. So many people say to me that they can't find the time to try this new hobby or spend time doing something that you love. And I absolutely understand that, right? We all have huge conflicting priorities and time is challenging. But this is where boundaries come in. Sometimes you have to say no to other people so that you can say yes to doing something that you want to do and say yes to yourself. And the second part of this is, as we've just mentioned, confidence is key. And I think that absolutely everyone is severely knocked in confidence by divorce, whether you have chosen to instigate it or your ex-partner has. And so it's very important that we are really careful on the words that we use to describe ourselves and our breakup. So you did not fail, I did not fail, your relationship failed. And that's the difference. It's not about blaming ourselves. It's not about negative self-talk. It's about talking about the relationship failed, I didn't fail. And it's super key that we talk to ourselves and about ourselves positively, and try and stem that negative self-talk that we can so easily fall into. And affirmations can really help with that. And I'm going to talk about that on a later slide. But first of all, I wanted to stop talking for a little bit and do some journaling together, because I think it's going to be super helpful in understanding exactly what I am talking about in discovering the new you and getting to know yourself again. And we can do some of that together. Before we move on to that journaling, is there any questions at this point? I actually can't see the chat box. So if anyone is brave enough to raise a hand or say, feel free. If not, I will get to the chat box at the end of the presentation.
Just a quick question, if I may, Amy.
Absolutely.
Yes, how do you reconcile what you just said with regards to talking positively and saying that it's the relationship that failed rather than I fail at the relationship, with the fact that it's important also to own to our mistakes?
Yeah, so that's a really, really good question. Thank you for asking that. So owning our reality and owning our world is owning our mistakes, yes. And if there's something that's happened in a particular relationship that we need to own and say we did something wrong and we either regret that or we wish it hadn't happened. That's one thing, and I am absolutely not saying that we shouldn't do that. But what I am saying is, once we have done that, it's a time to accept it, because whether we have done something wrong or we perceive it to be wrong, and we find ourselves in a situation now where that has happened, at some point we have to stop beating ourselves up about that. We have to stop feeling as though we are not worthy of anything in the future because we've done something wrong in the past. And we have to say, this is my new reality, this is where I am, and now I own it and I move forward with it. And it's so important that, as well as owning it, we don't continue to talk negatively about ourselves going forward, because that will create a self-fulfilling negative cycle that we will get ourselves into, where we tell ourselves we are not worthy, that we are worthless, that we're all of those things, and it will become a self-fulfilling prophecy because we start to believe them. So it's one thing to own our mistakes and say, I regret doing that, but then here I am today with that having happened, and here is how I want to move forward. Does that answer your question?
Yes, definitely. Thank you so much for clarifying this and explaining it so nicely. Thank you.
You're so welcome. If there are no more questions at this stage, please grab your note paper and pen if you have it, and we are going to do some journaling together. So I really want to make sure that this workshop is interactive and that we start to take some action on the stuff I'm talking about and spend some time discovering the new you, so that you can go away from this workshop feeling like we've made a start. And the way I want to do that tonight is with some journaling. And the reason I want to do that is because writing or journaling really helps us organize our thoughts. And also, one thing that I really like about it is you can write it down, and in the future you can come back and look at it and see how far you've come, which is the really incredible thing about it. It's also proven to do all of the things listed on this slide, which can also obviously only be a good thing. And so we're going to spend some time now journaling with some prompts that I've created that can hopefully start to spark some thoughts and ideas for you. So I'm going to go to the next slide. And here are 3 journal prompts that I'd like you to write down on your piece of paper, and I'm going to do it with you. I've got my notepad and pen here, and I'm going to set a timer for 5 minutes to write down the answers to the below. And what I'd ask you to do is write down immediately what comes to mind. Don't think too hard about it, just go with your gut. And then we will have a chat about it in 5 minutes time. So I'm going to set a timer on my phone, and we will chat in 5 minutes time. And obviously, if anyone has any questions during this 5 minutes, please feel free to ask. Okay, that's been 5 minutes. Does anyone feel confident enough, and you absolutely don't have to if you don't want to tell the group one thing that they wrote down as one of the answers?
I will.
Thank you, Simon. What did you write?
Okay, so it's for number one. I am having the most fun when I am exploring the mind with my youngest son.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing that. So how we look at these, so if you read what you've written, the things that you wrote down about when you're having the most fun, how often do you do those things? Could you do them more? Are there other ways that we can incorporate them into our lives? How long ago was it since you played your favorite childhood game? Is there a reason that you couldn't play it now? You know, just because we're not children anymore, there's no reason that we can't. And then practicing gratitude is an amazing way when you're having a bad day, hour, week, whatever it is, to bring ourselves back to the present and know that it isn't all bad. And so I'll share with you what I wrote in that list, which was I have the most fun when I am on stage, dancing, singing, acting. And what that made me think of was I haven't done that for a while, so I probably should do more of that. And then my favorite childhood game was running around, playing tag. And so that probably tells me that I should be doing more exercise and being outside more and running around, because why not? And then I wrote down a lot of things that I'm very, very grateful for, which just make me feel very in the present moment and very happy. This is the next stage that I want you to write down the answers to. Again, don't think too hard about the answers, just go with your gut. And I am also going to do the same. So I'm going to set a timer for another 5 minutes. That's our timer. Sorry, it's a really aggressive timer, like a wake up call. So hopefully in doing that, you can start to think about what you want your future to look like, how you want to discover yourself. And maybe take some time after the workshop to look at what you wrote down, especially to questions like, how do you want to show up in the world? And ask yourself if the ways that you've written down are the ways that you are showing up in the world. And if not, why not? And is there something that you can do to be able to show up in the world as you want to? I'll open it up again, although again, no pressure. If anyone would like to share anything that they wrote down then that maybe helped them see something that they didn't see before. Okay, I'm going to share what I wrote. I wrote that I want to show up in the world as confident, articulate, kind, loving, and I feel like I do. I feel like that's how I want to show up in the world and it's how I do. So I feel good about that response. I wrote down some other things that about where I want to go and who I want to be that I haven't yet achieved. And I'd like to ask myself after this workshop how I can go about doing this. I see, Kirsty, that you wrote that you found this one hard. I think a lot of people find this one hard because it's really like digging deep into ourselves about who we want to be and where we want to go. And you know, I think that can be really, really challenging, and that's why we do this. So I would recommend, if you did find it hard, to try and spend some more time either after the workshop or another day to sit down again and really try and dig into that and see if you can find some answers to the questions. And then last but not least, on the journal prompts, I'm going to give less time because there's less questions. The third and final journal prompt questions that I'd like you to answer is, what is keeping me from feeling my best? And what am I gaining from feeling stuck? Now, these questions can be a little triggering for some people because they go back to the cause and effect discussion that we were having. Because fear of this new world, fear of our new lives can keep us really, really stuck. Because even though we might be unhappy, we feel safe in what we know. And this is why very often we can stay in relationships, for example, far too long, even when we know we aren't happy. Because even though it's making us sad, it's what we know. And our bodies and our minds are conditioned to make us feel safe. And we feel safe with what we know. So try to just, again, flow with what comes straight to mind with these two questions and don't overthink it. And I will give us a couple of minutes to answer these two. That's our timer. Does anyone have any questions, thoughts, or want to share any of their answers to those two questions? Because those are sometimes for people the most challenging ones. So Hannah has written in the chat, fear of being hurt and safety from more hurt. I think that's absolutely fair, and it's a really, really common one. Because like we spoke about, staying in the same place is actually safe, even if we're not happy with the feeling of staying in one place. It can feel very safe because we're used to being in that place and it's what we know. And the safety from being more hurt is something that I absolutely understand. All I would say to that is we can never get to feeling amazing and getting to all the places that we want to do without the potential of more hurt or more pain. But you don't get the amazing stuff in life without the roller coaster of the ups and downs, of the good stuff with the bad stuff. And that is the challenge, but the also amazing thing when you can push yourself through that fear of the unknown, of being hurt, and own it and go out there into the world and try and do what you want to do. Kirsty says judgment. That is a really interesting one, and it's something that I think lessens with confidence work and work on affirmations and things like that, because when we feel super confident in ourselves and what we want from life, it can be so much easier to go after it without the fear of being judged, because unfortunately people will always judge us. There are those people in life and in our society. But when we feel comfortable and confident in ourselves and why we are going after certain things, the feelings of caring about being judged can really, really lessen. So that actually moves me nicely onto the next slide, which is really wrapping up what we've spoken about here today and talking about some of the ways that after this workshop you can continue to discover the new you, and do some of these amazing things that you want to do in this new life. So some of the ways I work with my clients to discover the new them is, first of all, meditation. So meditation, I'm sure that you're all familiar with it in some capacity. It can really quiet the mind and allow ideas to flow. So for example, in some of the journal prompts that we've just worked through, if there is a feeling that some of those questions were really hard to answer and you didn't know what to write down, doing some meditation can actually allow those ideas to flow. And you might find that in a meditation, an idea comes to you that would be the answer to one of those questions. It can also really help us with anxiety associated with divorce if you're feeling super overwhelmed. There's loads of free apps. Headspace is a good one that obviously has a free component to it that you can start off with. But there is also amazing videos just by typing it into YouTube, and that's where I have found some really incredible ones. I think we can also judge ourselves a little bit with meditation and feel like if we aren't incredible at it and we can't quiet our mind for a full 20-minute session, we've done meditation wrong and we've failed at it. That is absolutely not the point. Even if you can just sit for 5 minutes and just be present and be in the moment, that is meditation. The second thing I would recommend is asking your friends and family what they think you're good at, what they value about you, what you enjoyed doing as a child. If you couldn't remember, maybe some parents or aunts, uncles can remind you, and rediscover yourself through other people's eyes as well as your own. This can be especially helpful if you've been feeling low, because they can help you see all the wonderful things about you that maybe you can't see right now. The third thing is trying something new every single week. And that can be as simple as going for a coffee in the local coffee shop that you've never been to, but you wanted to try. I had a client recently who had been absolutely desperate to go to this new coffee shop that had opened near her, but she was really nervous about sitting somewhere on her own. She'd never really done that. She'd never gone for coffee on her own or for dinner on her own. And so it was a huge thing for her to go and just sit there for 20 minutes and have a coffee on her own. But she did it, and she felt really proud of herself and confident in doing so afterwards. Maybe it's going to a gym class you've never tried but wanted to. Whatever it is, it doesn't have to be something big. It can be something really, really small. But if every week you do something that's new, or something that you wanted to try, or something that you used to do and you don't do anymore, you can start to build that confidence of, yeah, I'm trying, I'm going out there in the world and I'm trying to build this new life for myself. The fourth thing that I've mentioned a couple of times, and I really want to reiterate here, is affirmations. So what that looks like that I do with my clients, and I would recommend everyone does it because it's amazing, is you write down a list of everything negative that you perceive about yourself. So some examples could be, I'm not attractive, I'm not smart, I failed, whatever it may be. And you change all of those negative statements into positive ones. So I am beautiful, I am worthy, I am whole and complete. I did not fail, my relationship failed. And you say those positive statements to yourself every single day for like a month, ideally. And when we do that, we are telling our unconscious mind these positive statements, and our unconscious mind can't help but to believe them. The more we repeat them, the more our brain just can't help but believe them. And so in turning those negatives into positives, we can really start to dim down that negative self-talk that we can get stuck in the cycle of doing. And I cannot speak highly enough of affirmations. I think they are incredible. And before I ever did them, I thought that it was ridiculous to write down these positive things and say them to myself. I found it embarrassing and weird. And then I did them and I realized how incredible they can be. You can also write them on post-it notes and put them in places around your house so that you can walk by them. And every time you walk by them, you read them to yourself. That's also an amazing way to do it. And then lastly, as we've mentioned, journaling, getting your thoughts on paper is so, so effective. Lastly, showing up here tonight and participating is a huge, huge act of bravery. It's a huge self-care opportunity, and it's a huge statement to yourself that you are willing to discover the new you, try new things, and start to go about building the incredible new life, which you absolutely can. So thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it so, so much. And I just wanted to open it up to questions. I've also put all of my contact details on this slide if you want to jot them down. I'm more than happy to answer any questions after this that maybe you don't want to voice publicly here in this forum. Please feel free to reach out to me afterwards in any one of these ways. I also offer a free 30-minute discovery call with all potential clients. So if you have something specific that you want to talk about, or you want to talk about anything that we've covered here in more depth, feel free to reach out to me and we can book that in. So thank you so much. I'll open it up to questions both in the chat box, or if anyone is feeling brave enough to come on and ask a question directly, feel free.
I wanted to ask you, Amy, if that's okay, if no one else has got questions about confidence. I know that in your last slide, you've given tips on how to, I think, nurture confidence by, the affirmations or trying something new and practicing meditation. I felt that the question that you asked before, what is keeping me from feeling my best? I feel that many parents, single parents, when they go through, I mean, me included, when we go through a relationship breakdown, the first thing that happens is that we lose our confidence.
Yeah.
And I think that's what is the most difficult thing to get back you know, that confidence that will allow us to go back to who we were. So
Absolutely. That's such a good point. And it's exactly the fundamentals of all of this, right? Because even if you figure out what it is that you want from life and who you want to be and where you want to go, if you don't have the confidence to then go after that or believe that you're worthy of having that, then you'll just have a plan, right? With no way of going about doing it. And so that's why building that confidence, and I personally can't speak highly enough of affirmations, as I mentioned, in doing that, is critical in a building block to enable us to achieve all of the great things that we want to.
yes, thank you.
Thank you. I see a question in the chat. Sorry, I'm just reading this, Wendy. Wendy, I think I understand your question and I'm going to try and answer it, but I may have misinterpreted it. So please feel free to tell me if I have. So I think what you're saying is when you're looking at where you want to go and how you want to get there, and you know that you've got something that isn't going to end anytime soon, can you still work through and become more positive, more confident during that? Is that your question? Yeah, okay, brilliant. So yes, you absolutely can. So even when we are, and I'm going to use divorce as an example, and I'm not sure if that was the example that you're mentioning in your question, but I'm going to use it as an example. So even when we're going through the divorce process and it's hard and it's challenging and you feel really stuck in it and it can last a long time if it's particularly conflicting, we can still be doing all of this work that we've spoken about to feel more confident, to plan our future life during that process. And in fact, I would argue that the sooner we do it, the better, because you don't want to wait until that thing, be it the divorce process and procedures and the legal things, is done to start working on yourself and owning your life and your new reality, because that could go on for a significant period of time, right? And if we don't start to do these things now, you just feel stuck for a period of months, potentially even years, while all of those things work through. So absolutely, I would recommend the journaling, the affirmations, the meditations, therapy, coaching, whatever it is that works for you, to do it absolutely during whatever it is that you're going through, to start to feel more confident. And you may find that whatever process it is that you're going through becomes easier because you are feeling better in yourself. So absolutely, and I hope that answers your question, and feel free to write another question if it didn't fully answer it. Samantha says, I'm quite supportive, very critical myself. Samantha, that's spot on. And I think the people that are most kind, most empathetic, tend to be actually the people that are most critical of themselves. They can be super loving and kind and supportive to everyone else around them. And some of the things that we say to ourselves, you would never say that to a friend or a family member who is going through the same thing. So totally understand that affirmations are going to be hard for you. That's even more reason that you should do them. So I recommend, writing down all of the negative things that you would say to yourself, all the criticisms that pop into your head on a daily basis about yourself, change them into positives and say them to yourself every single day for a month, and see how you get on, see if it makes a difference. And I think that it probably will.
Amy, what would you say to one tip that you would give to our single parents in Frollo, when they say that they're, usually they come, when they post anonymously because they feel overwhelmed with all the problems they have. They feel that they are in a rut and they cannot come out of where they are. They feel completely overwhelmed. You can sense that, yeah, they're just crying for help. And we've been there, many of us have been there in that situation. What would be for you the one tip, one single tip that you would give them where to start to try to gain the confidence to, to get everything back to normal if you want, or get back to where they were?
I think the biggest tip that I can give goes back to the grief cycle that we spoke about early on in this workshop, which is it is a process and we will not feel better tomorrow or in a week's time. And putting the pressure on ourselves to feel better is unnecessary, and it makes the feelings worse because we're putting that pressure on ourselves that we should feel better in a week, a month, 2 months, a year. By owning the grief cycle and allowing ourselves to feel the feelings and accepting that we will, by doing all of this work, feel better one day. We absolutely will. And the life that we can build after can even be greater than the life that we had before. I see that so often. So have the faith and the confidence that it will. But I do understand that when you're in the midst of it, it can be so hard to see that. And so I think that's why I talk about the grief cycle, so that people feel as though it is a cycle and it's not that you have failed because last week you felt pretty good and like everything was looking up, and then this week you feel terrible again. That is normal. And so my one tip would be to understand that divorce and separation is extremely painful, and not to put pressure on ourselves that it shouldn't feel painful.
That's great. Thank you, Amy. Thanks very much.
You're so welcome. Another question in the chat. What would you suggest people do when they're on the path of becoming married? So great question from Wendy. So what would you suggest people do when they are on that path of becoming their new self, but sometimes fall back because of past or ongoing problems? So again, I'd go back to similar to the grief cycle in that it's okay that we're on this path and we're doing everything that we can to feel more confident, to learn about ourselves, to create this new reality for ourselves. And that this week you feel great, you feel on top of the world, you've written your action plan, you're doing something new for yourself. And then next week something happens, and especially if you're going through the divorce process and something's happened and it makes you step right back into that unconfident, negative self-talking space, that's okay, because you've made a start. You're doing the work, and the work is not going to be a linear step by step. I feel more confident tomorrow, I feel more confident the next day, I feel more confident next week. It may be I feel really confident tomorrow, but then I've taken 2 steps back because something's happened, and now I've taken 3 steps forward. That's what I would say is be okay that it won't be just a step by step, and you may take steps back, but as long as you're doing the work and spending time on yourself and getting to know yourself and working on your confidence, then taking a step back is fine. Like, that's okay. That is absolutely okay. And what you will find is you'll take less and less steps back as you continue to own the journey. I hope that answers your question, Wendy. If there are no more questions, I will close off here. You have all my contact information on this slide. I have absolutely loved spending the last hour with you. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. Like I said, anyone has any other questions or things that they didn't feel comfortable to ask here in this forum, please feel free to reach out to me separately. And have an amazing evening. And I hope that you found this useful, and read back on some of the things that you wrote down and think about them, and see what comes up for you, and keep journaling, because it will be super, super helpful.